Hey, Danny, thanks for joining us today, man.
Thank you for having me.
Excited to talk
Pleasure.
acquisitions, talk traveling,
Yeah.
talk life, business, and everything in between.
Everything.
Good deal. So, Danny Sanchez, born in New York, moved to Miami when you were 5.
Yeah.
And we'd love to start with just some background and context on what were you doing before you started thinking about buying businesses and some professional background.
Sure. So there's actually not much in my background. So it's actually surprises a lot of people because they see what I do today and then you figure out, well, where'd you start? And it's really not much. But I I was going after high school, actually. I went to school for computer animation only to quickly find out that I could not do it. And that was the best I've ever done in school in general. I was getting straight A's. It was just one of those things where you realize that, my drawing skills weren't on point. And so it was always going to be where, like, I was always going to have a ceiling on top of me, and because when you get into the real world, nobody cares about your portfolio. I mean, they don't care about your grades. They care about your portfolio. Right.
Yes.
And so I realized, okay, well, my stick figures are barely making it. So I was like, and I had to end that dream of being a computer animator. But nonetheless, kind of went through a phase of a couple of years trying to figure out what I was going to do. I was a commodity broker for a second and then came back and I was living in Oklahoma for like 3 months stint and then quickly came back to Miami. And when I was in Miami, it's kind of like where the journey started from there. And but there's no like particular background. I was just working at GameStop as a manager and that was it. Yeah.
Wow. And is there any time that you remember where you thought like, hey, I could actually go buy a business? Or obviously there's a journey for you to become an entrepreneur. You started doing business. Do you remember by any chance, like when do you saw the opportunities like, oh, that can be me. I could go buy a business versus just starting new businesses?
I don't know if there was a moment. I think I was always just trying to look for something to do. Like life was calling me somewhere somehow. I didn't know what it would be or when or how, but I was always just constantly looking into stuff. And I was always very inquisitive. So even back when I was like 17, 16, I was a busser and I used to bus tables. And then I used to spend my money and buy like there used to be a program called Carlton Sheets where it was like a real estate program. So I wanted to learn more about that. But, even back then as a busser, when you're, when back in what, I don't even know, it was 2009, no, 1999, 2000, something like that. So I'd make $300-400 a weekend or something, but that series was like $300 like my whole weekend, but it was something I wanted to learn. So I was always self-educating myself because I didn't like going to college and just felt like extended high school. So it just wasn't for me. And but I always invested always in putting into programs, education, stuff like that. And I always say kids today, man, they have it so freaking lucky. Now, even with AI, they have even more luckier. Like they can find anything at like their fingertips in just a split second. And back then you didn't have that, and you had to dig deeper for it. And I did dig deeper for it and I try to educate myself. And I think you always just kind of look for that moment, that where it's like you preparing yourself. I guess it was like there was a quote I always loved. It's called "Success is when opportunity and what was it like opportunity and preparation meet." So you're preparing yourself for that opportunity, and that's where that success comes. But you have to wait for it, and sometimes you're preparing yourself, and you have no idea for what.
It's got to be the dance floor.
Yeah, it's got to be something. You're preparing yourself for something. You don't know what it is.
Yes. So you said about like knowing that you wanted something. You didn't necessarily know that it's what you're doing today.
Yeah.
But what was the first step for you into like becoming an entrepreneur? Was it like you started a side business, you were working with somebody else, or how did that happen?
It all just happened very randomly. So when I did go out to Oklahoma and I ended up coming back, I was sending an ex-girlfriend of mine some flowers on one of the larger companies called 100flowers.com. And when I did that, I saw a franchising tab on them. And so I clicked on it. I inquired about it because I was inquiring about anything. And I was back at my parents' condo, broke, in debt, and no job. So they actually called me back and they said that they had like one of 5 facilities left that they were selling around the nation, and one of them happened to be Miami.
Wow.
So she asked me if it was possible for me to do, and I was just like, yeah, absolutely. So I bullshitted my way through it, but I think that sometimes you have to do that in life. But you just say yes and you figure it out later, and that's kind of what happened from there.
So that was the first store, and obviously I know that you're in the flowers business now, but it's really not even the flowers business. It's more like the bigger picture, the game, and that this podcast is all about buying and selling companies, acquisitions. Yes. So obviously we're gonna dig it. We're gonna geek out about all of that. So you got that first location. What happens next? Is it just purely flowers and roses and everything shiny?
Getting that first location was actually quite the challenge, because I think that's when you figured out how I'm going to buy something I have no money buying, and one of the good things about the U.S. government, like their business that they have, is the SBA, the Small Business Administration, and it allows you to go buy companies for a lot less than you need, especially when things are not considered asset based. So when you're buying an asset like real estate, it's much easier to do that because a bank can know that it's a fixed asset. They can go and acquire it, take it back, whatever. But when there's goodwill associated to a sale, so for example, if I have assets and it's $1 million purchase, but the assets are only $100,000, if the bank had to foreclose on me, right, they're only going to have $100,000, but I need to buy this business for $1 million. So that aspect, that part of it is called the goodwill aspect, right? Like, which a lot of people have. A tech company, you don't have $1 million in assets, but you could have hundreds of $1 million in a code base, right? And that's literally your asset. But what does a bank do with that? Yes. So I had to go through the SBA route and try to figure out how that works, and going through what's called the 7A program. And through the 7A program is how you're able to buy companies that have high amounts of goodwill. So if a business does have, if I'm buying a company for $500,000, right, but 400,000 of it is just goodwill, because it's like a restaurant, for example, then 100,000 of it is only for like the chairs, the seats, the kitchen, and all that other stuff. So that's literally learning to buy a company with the SBA is always a challenge, because it's a lot of paperwork. It's a ton of paperwork, and they get everything, including your unborn child. So they want everything from you. It's crazy. Yes.
So I think I want to touch and go deeper on that one, because I think there is a misconception that, it is pretty difficult. It's a lot of paperwork, and it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of energy, but it's totally worth it. And I know you've done a ton of those, and we'll get to talk about a few of them. Has there been any big changes since you started with SBA until now in terms of the process, or is it still the same thing?
It's actually still the same thing. It's even better because it allows, there's more flexibility in there. They allow for more. So basically there was a cap before of like 5 million. I think it's like a 7 million now, or 6.5, something of that nature. But they've raised the cap. And so you're able to do certain things. They've also, I wouldn't say dropped the fees, but at one point in time when I would say probably in 2000, during the financial collapse in 2009, 10, 11, around there, the government did do something really well. They dropped all the fees associated with SBA, and the fees can be quite hefty. Yeah. So they zeroed out all the SBA fees, and that was great. And it just gave people the ability to go buy companies, and start their route in their world and whatnot. And we were able to take advantage of that too, because we bought a couple companies in that process. So,
so I think one of the things that I share with people is like, when people ask about like, hey, should I buy a business? Should I buy? First of all, tell them no right away. No, I'm just kidding. But like, it's always like, you gotta be really invested into it. But it comes with a personal guarantee. It's a lot of risk. So there's two profiles. There's two streams. One is people that have a lot to lose. And people, like in my case, like I didn't have a lot to lose. I was like, yeah, I done some move. I done, some things in my career, but I knew I wanted to take the risk. And for you, that you put in the first SBA loan, you put a personal guarantee, and then you do the second, and the third, and then the fourth, and the fifth, and now 10 and above. At any point, did you feel that the personal guarantee risk was different? Because yes, we got due diligence.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you analyze the deals. Yes, you get better at it, but there's still something completely out of your control that can swap out the whole thing.
Yeah.
Is that fear still there or not?
No, because I'll always bet on myself 100%. So I could care less whether there's a personal guarantee or not. I know a lot of people do care. And honestly, if there's a deal where I don't have to have personal guarantee, for sure I'm removing it. But because you just overall, you limit your overall liability across the board. But do I care so much? That's me personally. I don't really care so much. I mean, I've always bet on it myself. It's got me this far. I'll continue to bet on myself. And that's...
I think we're done. this is no, I love it. I like it. I like it. I was not expecting that, but really, I think that's the move.
Yeah.
And what
But it
is
worked out for you.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that's the point. But it's also like now I want to do it again. But I got married, and you know, you have kids as well. So like it's now I'm thinking about
bet on you.
exactly.
You know?
But I never connected that way.
Yeah. If you know you're disciplined, you know how hard you work, you know that you just eat, breathe, and live business all the time, you're gonna succeed. It's not that difficult to succeed in businesses when people get lazy. And when they're not visionaries and they're not thinking and they're not expanding, they're not growing, they're not evolving, you know, that's when they fall, all of them. You know, when you think about like a restaurant, like how many times you've been to a restaurant where you're like, this restaurant's been here for 20 years and before it used to be busy, but now it's not. But probably you look at the restaurant, it was the same 20 years ago and it's the same today because they never did anything to change it. They never evolved, you know? So a lot of companies don't evolve. And I think also another good indicator that would be also like Toys R Us. You know, Toys R Us in America was enormous, but they never evolved. They never did things to make Toys R Us different, you know, and then everyone else and their mother came and ate their lunch and of course they had to close, which by the way, funny story. I did work at Toys R Us. Yes. And my first day working at Toys R Us, I was Jeffrey the giraffe.
Oh, yes. Whoa. Okay. It's interesting. Yeah, I think one very powerful thing that you said about the businesses that you're buying right now is like the flower business going to be around no matter how many AIs, how many automation, that's still going to be a human thing. Maybe there's going to be other type of, you know, AI flowers or augmented reality. But it will be a good maybe shit for us to unpack what's your criteria for businesses and what's kind of the ideal company, either size or structure for the flower business and specifically.
Sure. For me particularly, it has changed and I'll buy anything from like a $5,000 transaction to, you know, a couple $1 million transaction. It doesn't matter to me. It depends more on the opportunity itself. So for example, you know, just a couple months ago, I bought one for, how much was it? Oh, like 2 weeks ago, I bought one for like 80,000, but I didn't actually keep it open. I closed it.
Oh, wow.
And I had to move it into my other locations. But they had a lot there that I could utilize. So if they have a good database of clients, I can use it in ways that they don't, because a lot of these flower shops, they run very mom and pop, you know, and so I was able to grow that. And I have a lot of stories in regards to how we kind of like expanded from one operation, how it just kind of came about. Because it wasn't always flower shops I was doing. I also owned dental laboratories, medical offices. And in those situations too, you'd be surprised, like what you buy a doctor's office for is not what people think, you know? So even if a company, just to give people who are listening to like some real numbers, you know, if a company or if a doctor is doing $300,000 or $400,000 in sales, then sometimes you only pay them like one time EBITDA. So if the doctor's only making on that like 150K, that's all I pay him, 150K.
Crazy.
And a lot of times it's because it's only tied to that doctor. And I think that's one of the bad things that some people do is they tie too many things to themselves personally because it's not sellable unless you're like a personal brand that you're just going to continue taking from forever, you know. But for the most part, you know, when they go in there and they have like, I don't know, it could be like, you know, Dr. Sanchez, for example's office, you know, well, that would be a poor way to like start the medical business because I can't sell that. I can't sell Dr. Sanchez. I can sell medical center I used to have, you know what I mean? Which was called True Care Medical Center, right? So I could sell that because that came with contracts. And so I think sometimes people they get into business, but they don't think about the way out. Like, where's you, and obviously you don't see it because you're starting it. You're so excited. You're not thinking about selling it. You're thinking about just running it. But you should position it to sell. You
Yes. Yes. Now those
know.
very different categories. When you were evaluating those deals,
Yeah.
it's more opportunistic, not necessarily strategically for like, hey, I'm gonna do a bolt-on like back then, like kind of what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
I remember like one of my mentors like in this acquisition world is Walker Daiwo, and he explains like he got so excited about buying businesses that he bought completely different businesses, like a printing company, a different kind of unrelated, and it's like the worst mistake ever versus like what you're doing now, which is sticking to one industry. So what was the thought process when you say, I'm going to jump into this? Was it numbers were really good, opportunity looked really great, and then you learn it, what?
So let me go back then, because like, for example, I bought the first business, which is the fulfillment center from unconventionalflowers.com, back in 2007. After that, then finally I was like making money in my life, and then I was able to buy like real estate and other stuff, and I ended up buying a doctor's office. So I was supposed to buy the property, but I don't know why the hell I ended up buying the business. And then next thing you know, we just started buying other doctor's offices. Now that's when I started actually acquiring more doctor's offices, because I wanted to find ways to bring in more business. So by bringing in the physicians into one center where I could take care of all the administrative stuff, which is typically the thing people hate to do, especially those that are creative or physicians, they hate to doing that stuff. We were able to kind of go through that path. And then somewhere in there, I also bought a dental laboratory as well. And so we were doing a lot of manufacturing of dentures and crowns, bridges, things like that. But after I sold the medical centers back in 2013, it wasn't until the following year, 2014, because at that point I was bored as hell. I just had the dental lab. It was like on automation. Then I
remember that you told me, it's like, you say something like, hey, when I get bored, I just go buy a business.
I do. And it like sparks me up again. And so, and then I also did the same thing with the, so I had the floral operation, and I had the dental lab, but and I also had my real estate company too. So I also had a background in business brokering, and that's how I was able to find a lot of deals too. So
where was that, like just purely real estate or business brokerage?
So I had my real estate firm,
yes,
which was always just for my personal deals, not really to help people out, although I have many times. But it was mainly just for me, and for me to go find my own deals and my own real estate deals, and then part of a business brokering association, which brought a lot of deals that I saw that I ended up buying. And so it wasn't until like 2024, and I was like, all right, I'm really getting bored here, or 2014, sorry. And I was getting super bored, and finally I was just like, we need to go buy something. I had my business partner, and I told him, I was like, let's just go find, like, this flower gig is not bad, you know what I mean? And I much rather do a flower gig than run a medical center. Medical can be really tough. You're dealing with insurances in the US and stuff like that, and they don't pay, and it's just, it's a pain. And then you have to work with doctors too, and they can be a pain to work with. And sorry to any doctors listening, but but it's kind of like, it's the one thing I learned in that operation that I will never do again. It's kind of like when you own a medical center, and there's your doctors that work for you and stuff like that. They own the medical license, So it's kind of like having a car, but you're not allowed to drive it, And so I couldn't drive my business in the way that I wanted to. And it just didn't make sense. And I just like, every time I want to make a move, it's like, I just need like their permission, and then they don't want to do anything. And then it just goes nowhere. And then I can't move as fast as I want to move. And medical also stops you from doing it. But nonetheless, when I got out of all that in 2014, I ended up buying my first retail store. And I bought that in April of 2014. And then 6 months later, I bought another one. And then a month after that, I bought another one. 15 days later, I bought another one. And then 6 months later, I bought another one, and then kept going. So I bought a little over 20-something shops. Sometimes, though, to get back to your question, like the deal sizes and what I typically go for, it depends. Sometimes I could buy a shop for $5,000. Sometimes I could buy a shop for $1 million. It all depends. I'd rather buy a shop for $1 million, because that lets me know it's succeeding, and I'm going to buy like a successful shop that's making money, And so I'd rather get the more expensive ones, because those are like good shops that I'd rather buy, but they're not all out there all the time. And so, throughout all these years, I've tried my hardest to just keep building the floral operation and everything that I have, and I think we've done a pretty good job at it. I think we're the largest now in South Florida as far as floral retailers go, and one of the largest in the country as far as floral retailers go, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
But I definitely am not stopping there. So
Absolutely.
until I could say I am the largest retailer.
Amazing. Very inspiring. And I know that there's many different paths that you can take at this stage in this maturity of like going and building with private equity, or just getting to the next stage, and that's going to be a different kind of model for sure. But I'm curious, like if you have explored a lot of the different creative deal structures out there, creative financing. I know I tend to be allergic to it. From like, I saw a business before, and I remember people wanting to just offer peanuts, and like that's just kind of disrespectful. And as a buyer as well, like the brokers right now, more than ever in 2025, they don't want to talk to anybody that says seller finance or anything like. It's like a red flag, right? But in your case, given that you have the trajectory, the background, people will be like, I want to join your group. I want to go big in your vision. So you have that option, but you're still doing SBA. How do you balance between, let me just go by SBA or do creative finance deal, seller finance, or any other creative structure that you see?
I always put owner financing in my deals. It's a very good creative structure to put in there. The reason why you do it is not necessarily because you're getting an SBA loan or you're getting a loan in general from the bank. You don't really need the owner financing. In fact, it's probably better just you get owner financing. But it makes the owners involved, and they just can't leave you high and dry. So when they sell you the business, they still want to see you succeed. Because the truth is, everybody is in some way still connected to their business personally through their own phones, right? And someone's going to call them. They've built relationships, as any business owner does. You build relationships with your clients, sometimes deep friendships. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what those deep friendships are. I mean, we don't get to that in like, in the whatchamacallit, in the period where we're trying to figure out like the financials and everything like that. They're not going to tell me all that, mm-hmm. but I want them, tied to what we're doing. I want them tied to our success, so that when we take over, they want to see us succeed. And I have a very good history of, of paying everybody back with time and 100%. So I've never had that issue. And
what's the when you're doing an SBA, you do no more than 20% seller finance? Or you can go more.
Well, SBA you can do is 10% down. You don't have to go 20%.
Yeah. No, what I say with like the
owner financing post portion.
Yes.
Sometimes I'll even make it 10% too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like it'll be 10% of it will be owner financed, or even if it's a small piece, that keeps them tied to me for a year. Yeah. But like, I'm not letting you go. Like, you're with me.
And then have you tried this whole 100% self finance?
That typically will never work. No owner that wants to like sell their business is going to be like, oh, I'm going to bank on you and I'm going to sell it for 100%.
Right.
Unless they want some exorbitant amount of cash, that they'll be like, okay, I'll buy for your exorbitant amount of cash, but 100% financed, Yes. Either way, you'll still have to put something down.
Right. I talked to, there's a guy doing a roll up. I'm not going to mention his name, but he bought about 20 marketing agencies based out of Canada. Got to the US and started saying like, hey, you agency owner, you're burnt out, you're tired, you go ahead and join our group and we'll pay 2 times EBITDA, but we're going to pay that in stock. We're not giving you cash. And that was kind of the whole narrative. And he did it one time, another time. And now they're planning to go public. I don't know if they're going to succeed or not. I haven't heard from them in 2 years. I'm going to do some digging. But I did talk to them because to me, it's like, I'd rather join forces with somebody like in your case, like a florist could be like, I'd rather join Danny on that trip that he's going versus for him on his own may not have a lot of future. But that was very interesting to me that it's not really, hey, I'm taking your business, seller finance, more like I'm giving you a value today and you get to work in the new entity. You get the salary, compensation all figured out. You get all this stock and everything, and you get a piece of the larger company.
Yeah.
So again, I have yet to see, but that's what I'm asking. Like, have you seen anything else that works other than SBA or any of
I haven't done anything like that with stock yet. However, it has come to my mind several times to do something like that. Mm-hmm. The thing is that if I feel that I can still just own it 100% without having somebody like to have stock in there, I'd rather not have to deal with it, personally. And if I am going to deal with it, I'd rather it come with like a big loaded check with a venture capital or private equity or something.
Yeah.
Or a family office. But I don't know. I think that's probably like how I would pursue it. But I think for me personally, I typically stick to just regular conventional bank financing,
Mhm.
and then owner financing in there. Um, Also, the idea of exchanging stock is a good idea. I think it works better when you're a larger company. So they call me now, which is great. Like the way I first started off too is when I was trying to buy a bunch of flower shops in South Florida. I used to send postcards, so like like literally every month, and use these giant postcards. Make sure they were oversized, right? And I would send them to every single flower shop in Miami-Dade, Broward, and the Palm Beaches
Mhm.
to see if they would be looking to sell. And every now and then I got a call. I got a call from somebody who got my postcard and wanted to sell to me, and it had the conversations going.
Mhm.
So, and then usually if you walk in any like flower shop in South Florida, you go to their office, you'll find my postcard sitting there. It's like they're like waiting for the day they take that shit out and they're like, you know what? It's time.
Yes.
So I think that's one of those things that I'll probably get back to that more. But even as I try to expand on a larger scale, I'll be doing it more on a larger scale. But um, to go back to your point, definitely, I think those deals are more prominent once you get into like a larger scale, because then people are putting your trust behind your stock. Because
Yeah.
like, what is your stock worth? You know what I mean? So if it's just like you and you got nothing, like you're just one other shop or two other shops and be like, well, I don't give a crap about your stock.
Mhm.
But if you have like 20, 30, 40, and you're a much larger organization and you can sell them the vision of like, hey, we're going to take this public, or we're going to be doing this, or we're going to be doing that, and you get to own a piece of this business as we continue to grow, then at that point they might be like, I like that idea,
Mhm.
because it keeps them somewhat tied to like the industry that they love.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Before I go to the next section, I just kind of comment like the past few months where my head is being at with this whole thing. There's a whole lot of talks about sales leaseback and then ABL, asset-based lending. Very different from what I've been just learning the past 5 years. SBA, SBA, SBA. Obviously, you done SBA, which is pretty unique. It wouldn't apply to your business or mine
Yeah.
because we don't have asset-based businesses. But I do want to find out, and if you're listening, and even for you, if you do know anybody that has done any sales leaseback deals, I reach
Yeah.
out to somebody that's gonna come on the
Yeah.
show. It's pretty unique, pretty different model, and also the asset-based lending is more like $1 to $2 million in revenue, all based on the assets of the business. Again, digital businesses will not work.
They give you there's asset based loans out there, but they're usually at very high interest rates. They're like loan shark rates. You know what I
Mm,
mean? It's not. I mean, if you're having to get yourself into them, you're probably in a pickle.
mm,
Like you don't want to have to get one of those loans. You'd
interesting.
rather just get a conventional, because it's also the amortization period as well. So the amortization period could be 3, 4, 5 years. Well,
Mhm,
that's a really low amortization period, and you're going to pay a very high monthly payment.
mhm.
So I don't know. If there's one thing I've probably learned from, by the way, I've bought flower shops, dental offices, and medical and well, dental labs and yeah, medical offices. But I've looked into so many other kind of companies before, because as the business brokering profile, like I was able to jump into a lot of businesses and see how many people are doing different things.
Mhm.
But I used to want to try other companies, try other stuff, and
Why was that?
when or what was it?
Why? Why?
Oh, I like to own a lot of different things. You know what I mean?
Was that ever the thought of like, diversifying, or it's like, oh, I just want to do something different and tired of the flower shop?
Yeah.
Or is it that just me in the digital space? It's funny because I see people doing e-commerce, like, oh, I just want to do service.
Yeah.
Service people want to do software. Software people want to do the next thing.
Yeah, I think I just like, I don't know. I might just have a problem. I mean, I'm just like addicted to like business ownership. So I think it's like fun. And every time I think about opening up another company, it's like more fun to me. And I just have fun doing it and I love it. And I don't know. I've looked into so many different types of companies. And the one thing I can always tell people is that like what people perceive and what actually is are two separate things. People usually perceive something and then they'll be like, "Oh wow, they must be really successful. How busy? Look how busy everything is." Then you dive into the numbers and you're like, this guy's not making a nickel, you know?
Mhm.
So, you realize that people are just not as the fluff goes, there's a lot of fluff out there,
Yes.
and people fluff a lot.
Yes. So all that comes back to what you were saying earlier, like the mindset, and you
Yeah.
say preparation, learning, developing, investing in yourself, betting yourself. Um, there's certain stages where, like you said, now you get the freedom to have more time flexibility.
Yeah.
You have stability. You got all these different opportunities as well. What makes you go from like, hey, without getting into very specific numbers, but like, you know 10, 20, 50 million to like 100 million, where 100 million you're like a whole different corporate structure, you got leadership teams,
Mhm.
you got a lot, like lifestyle is no longer the priority.
Yeah.
It's more like hustle and corporate. How are you thinking through that as you have like the next opportunity, which is go raising capital? And
It's funny you say it because that's exactly like the stage that I'm in. I'm not at 100 million yet, but I'd like
Mhm.
to get there. So, but my mindset is there.
Yes.
My mindset is there, and I think we just attended a mastermind that was talking about that and about all the points. Like those 120 points of like mindset shifts to become to get a company that does over 100 million. And I'll tell you, man, when I was looking at that whole list, I was like, man, 80% of this I've already completed. Like I've already made that shift.
Wow.
And it was almost like reasserting my belief of like I need to make these changes because this is how I'm going to get to the next stage.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's hard for people to see initially because it's like you're not there, but it's the cart before the horse. So you're like it's not you're not there yet, and then you're like, well, do I make the change now? Do I make the change later? And for me, I do no now. I'm doing it now, making the mind shift now, and it's gonna come because I'm making this mind shift. And that's it. And that I'm not the noise doesn't bother me,
Mhm.
whatever somebody might say. I'm very set on where I want to go. I mean, I took it this far and I knew I could take it to the next stage. And it goes back to what I told you, believe in yourself, right?
Mhm.
So if you believe in where you're going, what you're doing, then bet on and but the I've a couple like say probably like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, I started doing a lot of stuff to make this mind shift, you know, and it was because I had a deal fall through,
Mm.
and I thought it was a big deal, and I thought it was going to happen, and it was very disappointing when it did not, you know. And I think these are always like opportunities. At the moment, you don't see it, so it's an opportunity to like that when it fell through, I was so disappointed and I was like sad, a little depressed, and then and I didn't know what to do, and I'm like, I don't even know what excites me anymore. And I just said, you know what? Screw this shit. I'm gonna get back on this horse. And I'm like, I'm going to freaking double my company by the end of this year. And I had to start that in May.
Mhm.
Right. And so I didn't have much time to do it. I didn't double it, but I 80% got there.
Wow.
So and because I had lost so much, my one of my largest deals that I had, well, the deal that I had with 1 Inch of Flowers had finally ended after 16 years. Plus the other deal fell through. Like it was a string of like bad events,
Mm.
and nothing great came from it, unfortunately. But then there was always a light at the end of the tunnel if you can see it,
Mm.
right? And sometimes people don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. They get so dived in on like where like what's going wrong than what could possibly go right.
Mhm.
And I'm a glass half full guy. You know what I
Yes.
mean? I like to look at things like that. And I think that's what keeps my drive kind of going to the next item, the next thing on the list. And going through that moment though was one of those shifts. And it's funny because I've embedded this in my employees. And I told them, like, when one door closes, another one will open. So don't worry, because there's been moments where maybe somebody's left in the key position, um, or there's been some big thing, and then they're just like, well, what do we do? And I'm like, don't worry. When one door closes, another one will open. I promise you. And I
Mhm.
was like, you don't see it right now, but I promise you in the next 2, 3 weeks, you're going to find it. And I was just like, or we could talk about it. We can see what that actually is. And so this recently happened where I had two managers leave in the same store, which left me like managerless at one of my locations. And it was like, damn, this sucks.
Mm.
Like, what am I going to do now? You know what I mean? And we actually found this an opportunity. We wanted to use it as our satellite branch rather than having it managed by a manager. And it can start the process of how we were going to expand this more like US wide, right? With more hub and spokes. And so we found the opportunity in that. And we were able to shift staff, brought down cost of labor in certain locations. Like there was a plus side of it all, So we didn't look at it like that. And it's funny because one of my employees, when I hear her speak now, she sounds like me. And she's been with me for 10 years, and
it's not ChatGPT or AI.
No,
Okay,
she sounds like me, man. And it's crazy because like I've embedded things in her head for the last 10 years, and she's like drank my Kool-Aid, and now she believes in me. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges in a business is making sure your staff believes in your direction and making sure your staff believes in where you're going. And I think that comes back to like leadership styles in general.
Do you mind if we go deep with one question? It's more like personal and spiritual related to this. And it's okay if you don't have the answer, because I certainly don't have it. And that's where I'm like challenging with this whole business. But how do you not get attached to the outcome? How do you detach? Like you said, right now it took 10 years to finally make it like Danny.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you need to overcome and like not be attached to Danny, and Danny, who's now like how to let go of yourself.
Yeah.
Because what you were saying, at least for me, I'm speaking about myself, but I want to hear your opinion. It's like all the doubts, frustration, even suffering come from when I'm just thinking about myself and my stories, and when things are not going my way.
Yeah.
That's when all the emotional roller coaster, and even the worst deal that I heard in this podcast and Life and Friends, is when the main component of it is the person, and it's the attachment to that identity of like, dude, you are a freaking winner, you're a champion, and things go south.
Yeah.
So anyways, I think the question is more like attachment. What does it come to mind? What does it mean to you? Attachment
to the business, attachment to staff, or who am I attached to?
Attachment to your identity of success, attachment to the success.
Yes. I think sometimes people perceive maybe it's two ways actually. Because sometimes I think people perceive me to have more or do more than I am, and I don't see myself as that. And then while others, for myself personally, I look at that and I look in the mirror and I say to myself, well, I'm not there yet. You know what I mean? So I don't see sometimes what other people see, which is good and bad, because obviously it keeps you going for more. But at the same time, you should like take a moment. And I have taken moments to sit back and go like, you know what? I've done a lot. We have built a lot. We have, this is not easy. And I'm, and in the span of less than 10 years, I probably became one of the top florists in the nation and one of the largest. And now, I always tell people in the real world, nobody knows who the hell I am, but in the floral world, people do. I am somebody in the floral world. So, I say that as like, not in an ego way, but I say that in a way of like, it's an appreciative way. Like I'm very appreciative for what I have and what I built, because I also do see like the amount of people that work super hard to like get by every day. And I realize I'm so grateful. Like I'm able to live here, we're in Medellin right now, and I love Medellin. And I had the freedom to move here and still run my company, and still do it successfully. And I'm very super duper appreciative of that. And I actually feel like I work harder here now more than ever before, but I do it now with a smile on my face. And I'm very happy, and I'm very happy with like where I'm going. But I'm not attached so much to like, I am attached to the success part because I don't want to lose it. And I want to keep that going, and I want to keep growing it to where I feel successful, and I think I guess I would just feel shame if I didn't do it, because I have that goal. It's not money. It's literally just accomplishment. Like that's what a real entrepreneur is, more attached to the accomplishment than they are the cash, right? The money's like an idea, like the, what do you call it? Like the offshoot, of success. But I think the journey and the accomplishment of something is worth everything, And I sometimes, you know, the other day it was funny. I actually with going back to like when you feel that moment of appreciative or like your pinch me moment. I remember I was walking to my cooler. It was like a Mother's Day, I think it was, or Valentine's Day. I walked into one of my import coolers, and when I walked in there, I was like, I looked around and it was so many freaking boxes. And I go, what is all this? And the guy, my buyer goes, this is all yours. And I go, what? I'm like, when did we buy all of this crap here? I mean, it must have been like, dude, I don't even know, man, like 2,000 boxes of flowers. I mean, there was an insane amount, probably about 30 to 40,000 roses in there. And just an insane amount of flowers. Insane. And that was already because a shipment had already left all the stores. I'm like, so there's more? And he goes, oh, yeah. And I'm like, God dang, like, this is crazy. And it was like one of those moments where you're like, you look back and you're like, damn, that's really cool. Like, I remember when I was just buying like 20 boxes. Here I am buying, you know, I added 2 zeros to that.
Yes.
So,
That's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think yeah, it's a journey of like finding purpose in what we do and figuring out like all these deep questions. So thank you for opening that. I think to start kind of wrapping up, I know we talk about the journey and the kind of deals that you have, and now what are like the future? Like, what does that look like for you? You could go raise capital, partner with private equities, go buy a bunch of more companies. Like, what will you say like 3 to 5 years from now will be an ideal place to go to, a destination for you as a company?
You know, I'm in the process of actually doing like a real company-wide rebrand. And since I've already felt like I've been positioning myself, and, you know, I'll tell you one thing too, growing a business is tough because when you're growing it, you don't realize the shifts you need to make in the way you do things, you know? And, you know, just to get like on some exacts, for example, like the way you set up your QuickBooks account or your accounting, you know, you might just set up as like sales. Well, then you realize that when you're doing now millions and millions and millions of dollars in sales, you actually need to break down what sales is. Sales from where? Sales from here, sales from there, sales from here. And it's just like traveling expenses to where? You know, is it room and board? Is it meals, entertainment? Is it whatever? Like you realize you have to start breaking this crap down more and more and more and more and more. And so that, because if not, you can't group in all these numbers. You'll never be able to find where things are off. And when the numbers start flying and they're just way more of zeros behind everything, you can lose track of it real quick, you know? So I think I think like I'm making that I've made that shift, and I ended up, as the last couple of years, I just started changing everything. I split up everything and I said, we're creating departments here. And I created departments. I put key people in each location, from HR to accounting to software development to marketing, and then product development, and then store operations, you know. And once we had that, now I felt like we had like a base. And then I had to put people in place on those bases in order to start focusing on that mindset shift where we're going to grow. So it's like you're trying to build out all these. And I always tell people this, like you walk into like a Target or something like that, or something in America, right? Or like whatever here. But, and you walk into a store or a big corporation and they have all this stuff. They have the HR departments, they have all this accounting stuff. They have all these operations flowing, right? And you wonder yourself, you walk into it and you just start doing it because that's what the procedures are. But who created those procedures, you know? Like, and so when you're growing, you realize nobody's going to create the procedures but you. So you got to start creating all these procedures. I'm like, okay, well, how do I do HR again? Like, what do we need, a manual? Well, what do we put in the manual? I don't even know. And so you start researching like what to put in a manual. Then you have the ops thing. Then you have accounting structures and like flows, and you have to start building all this stuff, you know? And I think we've done that now. So now it's kind of the next phase, which is like, okay, time to acquire more. And I want to acquire a lot more, and I don't want to move slow. And I am now looking more into like private equity, venture capital, and family offices. And those are challenging too, because you got to pitch it. And I'll tell you another mind shift that happened to me too, was back in November, is not feeling like before then, like I was capable of pitching to a venture capital company or to somebody in the VC world. And to anybody who's listening or thinking about, you know, moving into the venture capital world or trying to pitch for an idea for money, you know, I think we all have heard of ideas of that where just we shake our head being like, that got how much? Like they gave him $5 million for what? And you're wondering like, why would anybody give these people money? But really what they are, they just spoke about their business, and they were able to to showcase where their growth can be. And so everybody starts a business with the idea of growth, and all you have to do is showcase it. And I realized back then in November, when I was having two different conversations with two different people about giving me a lot of money, and actually one of them did agree to give me a whole lot of money. Now, learning about those VC deals and how they work can be very complex. And you realize that there's background stuff in there, and you got to start researching all those terms. And although I didn't take it because I felt like I wasn't ready, what I did shift in my mind was that, hey, you know what? I don't need to feel so shy about like going out there and doing venture capital. I was actually having other people helping me out because I didn't feel like I was capable of being in the room because they knew all these acronyms I didn't know, And so at the end of the day, you realize that, it's okay because they might know more acronyms than I do when it comes to like setting up these VC deals, but I know the business. And they're not going to come run my business, right? They're going to sit back behind their desk and they're just going to shoot money and that's about it. They're going to look at deals, but they need me in the same way they need everybody else to give money to. So I think when everyone kind of creates that shift that like you are worthy of like pitching to anybody, and they'll decide how passionate you are about your business and whether it's going somewhere for them.
Wow. Yeah. It's a whole different game.
It is a whole different game. Yeah. And I think trying to learn it is really challenging too, but it's not rocket science, Yes. So everybody can learn and everyone can do it. And like I said, I mean, how many times do you look at a company, you're like, they got how much? Like, who would fund that? I would never even throw a penny in there, but, suddenly they're getting 20 million. You're like, for what?
Yeah. I think that one comment also as well for listeners that there is a spike on interest from like all these groups that you mentioned into small business acquisition. So one is there's a group out of Texas that they're now rolling up pool services and like home services deals, and like venture capital drop a check, and now they're going and using that. Obviously we all know the story about the aggregators in the e-commerce space that went terribly wrong with all this Trashio and all this brand, like you raise billions of dollars and then they crash. And but I think there is still hope on like taking a lot of that knowledge and wisdom that they have had for like 30, 40 years. Yeah. And applying it into small business acquisition. So yeah, curious to, have the conversation a year from now and see what you learn from those people. Yeah. Private equity, whole different level, whole different game, and it changes dynamics. You say mind shift, really old mindset. As we start wrapping up the episode, what are some of the mindsets that that you have to decide and make it happen right now, but you're struggling with it? Like, what's the next level for you mindset wise?
I think it's knowing when to take, like when we're talking about venture capital and when to shift a lot of stuff. I think that's where I'm trying to figure out when do I take the cash and when do I go for the expansion? I think currently also I'm in the process of looking at much larger operations to purchase, and this will be a big game changer in my career. And I would say also there's, some of the mind shifts I would say that need to happen, and every business should do at some point, is keen in on your financials more than anything. At one point we were so behind on our financials, and that's when I made the change to say, you know what, we're going to bring in an accountant to work full time. Wow. And that in order for us to be on top of our stuff, so we're not so far behind, because I couldn't even tell you what we had done like 5 months before. And that's sad for a business, in this business of my size. I was just like, how do we not know what we did 5 months ago? Mm-hmm. And so like, how are we positioning ourselves and how can we do all that? But I recently had brought in some consultants to help me out with even getting it better than what I have it out now. And it's amazing. Like some of those things you don't even think about, so if there's anybody's out there and you need like the consulting of the financials aspect of it and setting yourself up for sale. And I think that's a good thing to do. Like set your business up for sale, even if you're not going to sell it, because just the way that you position the numbers is super duper helpful. right? So you position the numbers in a way that on a P&L looks juicy, but on a tax, you can also write off a lot of stuff and pay nothing, you know? So there's multiple ways you can do it. But definitely bring in at some point like an accounting strategist and an accounting expert to help you position it for sale or for venture capital. And I think once you do that, you'll find that they'll be able to find a lot of things in there. Another big thing we're also looking to do is actually open up a call center operation. And that's where I'm learning now about call trees and same consulting group actually got me involved into all this, and realizing that, you know, I have millions of customers. I have databases with millions of people in it, and we don't call them out, you know, and people love to be reminded about flowers and when to order, you know, when it's like their anniversary and like, hey, you remember last year, this week's coming up, it's your wife's anniversary. Do you want to order flowers? You know how many men would take that, you know? And I saw the power of it when I was, when I had one of my retail stores that I have now. It was this 80-year-old lady that would go in there and she would just do phones and she would do outbound calls. But I always knew when the sales were up, because when I would get the email reports, the sales of that store were always double. You know, every single time the 80-year-old lady would work, like you just reach in your pocket and grab your money. And she was just doing outbound calls. So I think that's a big thing that we have to do now. And it's a big shift that we're going to make into positioning ourselves as a much larger organization. And also the other big shift we're going to make is the rebranding of everything. And once we get into the rebranding of all my retail locations and focusing on this larger vision that I can sell to a venture capital company to say, or a private equity or family office or whatever, whoever has money, if you're listening, give it to me. You know, I can sell that to whoever, you know what I mean? But I got to show them the vision, like, where is this going? It's 10 locations now. But let me show you how this can be 100 locations. How can it be 200 locations? Because that's what they're more that's what they're more enthused about, you know. So you got to sell this big vision, this big picture, and I think that's the big mind shift we have to make now.
Wonderful. What about I know you're exploring some of the SaaS components of all these different businesses, and I believe there's like a Shopify app that could play a bigger role as well. Is there an opportunity to separate the acquisition work and just focus on the SaaS business and grow that with venture capital, or do you think like they all have to be combined? Like, what are you thinking on the SaaS play?
So I have I have a SaaS company, and
you acquired or started?
I started from scratch. Great. Yeah. So I have
still.
So I have an application on Shopify. It's a Shopify app that is for the floral industry, because the floral industry is a very complex business, and people don't think of it as a complex business, but we manufacture on the spot, much like a restaurant manufactures on the spot, where most people don't. You know, they don't have a manufacturing plant inside their retail store, you know. But we do. We're manufacturing custom arrangements all the time. So I can't pre-make these things. And that can be a tough element for us. So where was I going with that? I think in general, yes, like we need to, like, as far as the SaaS company goes. So basically we were able to create this application for Shopify. Because if you think about it, Shopify lends itself to you buying for you, right? So if I'm buying from a retail store, it's sending to you, but in Shopify, you need to send to somebody else, right? As a florist, it's like the only business where you're buying for somebody else. You're never really buying for you, right? So we have to make that dynamic shift inside of Shopify, and that's what my application does. Plus, it gives you all these tools and features and things that we need as a flower company, and it's available worldwide. So those companies are separated, although they are somewhat managed together. And but I think, and I've built other technologies too for the floral industry, and I enjoy building technology. It's fun, but I think there's ways that I can integrate more and do more with technology and my business, especially now with AI. You know, with AI now, I think that's even more so, where I'm trying to find ways to automate the crap out of everything. I think my staff always tells me, they're like, you know, you'd probably replace us with robots. And they're halfway correct, but maybe they're always correct. But I actually, it's not that I want to replace them with robots. It's that I want to enhance whatever it is that they're doing, you know? And I remember the other day going to my staff and looked at her desk, and it was a ton of papers on there. It drove me insane because I hate a busy desk. For me, a busy desk is like a busy mind, and you don't have clarity. And so I asked her, I was just like, if you had to stop working today, how long will it take you to complete everything here on this desk? And she goes, like 2 weeks. I said, okay. So if you took a vacation off for like a week, you'd probably be 3 weeks behind. She's like, probably. And so I was like, okay, well then that mean it'd be best for me to figure out a way, right, where I can expand on that. And I said to her, what happens if I can get this down to 1 week and then down to 3 days, So when I grow, I don't need to grow my administration. I can keep it right where it's at without having to make a change, So I'm trying to get everybody in the mind shift of like, accept the AI, accept the technology, and because it's something that's not going away, and if we can all accept, some of the things that are there and find ways to automate the crap out of our companies, there's more in it for us.
Yes.
At the end of the day.
Wonderful. Danny, you share a lot, man. Good stuff all through the show. Appreciate you. And to wrap up, any final advice for first-time buyers or businesses, either established business owners that are looking to buy or people that are just wanting to invest and acquire a business?
Oh, yeah. I think, I've done it so many times that when you buy a business, and why I like buying them so much is that when I put in an offer, I already know what the closing table looks like. I've seen it so many times, and so I'm able to put myself in that mindset. But don't be scared of the process. It's usually not that difficult, but definitely they should always be create good relationships and do business with good people, because if you don't, they could just lend into lawsuits, and they can lend into things that are just going to cost you money at the end of the day. And that's not worth it, and I've let deals go because I didn't want to work with somebody, and it's okay. Like it's not worth the money to take the headache. And when you feel that somebody's a bad person and you're feeling a little uneasy about it, this is getting more like not even diving into like the financial side, but more on the emotional side, like follow your instincts on these things. And if something doesn't feel right, don't force it because it's probably not right. Your instincts are probably right, and don't move forward with something that doesn't feel good. If the owner you're buying it from doesn't feel good, if you're getting a shady vibe from them, like they're not being forthcoming, walk away. Walk away, because they're not going to be forthcoming later, Yes. And I've had people I've bought companies from that they next day disappeared, never heard from them ever again. I have others that that they're literally still in our lives, and they call us and see how things are going, and they really want our success. Wow. So I've had it from both things, but one thing I always tell people is that do business with good people. Yes. Or else it'll just be bad results and with bad people, and you're gonna end up in bad problems, and that's not worth it.
Yes. Appreciate you, Danny. Great chatting with you. Very Likewise. Inspiring story. Likewise. And I hope to see you a year from now, and I just maybe do a round 2 and celebrate the next milestone. So thank you, man.
Hey, thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.